What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, May 17th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's a lot going on here. And so let's get right on into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. Going to start off again about what is our local news, but apparently is being covered pretty much internationally at that point, and that is the volcano down on the Big Island. And about 4:15 this morning, there was a major eruptive event at Kilauea that shot an ash cloud 30,000 feet into the air. That's taller than Mount Everest. Pilots are being warned to stay away from it. The winds, unfortunately, are now from the southeast, so we're probably going to get a lot of fog up here to have to deal with. Volcanologists are saying this is a big event. They're not ready to say this is the big event that they have been forecasting. There may even be worse to come. So we just wait and watch and see what's happening. But it really is, it's certainly the biggest eruption since Claire and I moved here, and it's going to rank among the larger eruptions of the volcano in recorded history. So anyway, the Senate is voting or has voted on the confirmation of Bloody Gina for director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and it's kind of expected that she will sail through that here. Global condemnation is continuing to pour all over Israel for the Bloody Monday massacre, and it's causing a lot of people to basically challenge their prior assumptions about Israel and whether or not what they're doing to the Palestinians is really right and just. One of the articles that talks about this, Sputnik News, is saying the international community is condemning Israeli violence against Palestinians after the IDF killed more than 60 Palestinians and injured more than 2,400 on Monday, just that one day, in response to Palestinian protests demanding their right to return to territories seized by Israel in 1948. And again, the government is saying it's all the fault of Hamas. Corporate media is trying to whitewash it. In fact, they're not even reporting on it anymore. But there's an article over here in originalantiwar.com that I think lays out a warning we all have to heed. The West's failure to act in this massacre will result in more massacres, because Israel is once again being told by the rest of the world they can do whatever they want and nothing will happen to them. Certainly nothing's going to happen at the United Nations as long as Nikki Haley is up there in her little cheerleading outfit and her pom-poms going, veto, veto, veto. But no government should be above the law. And a lot of people are still very disturbed about the juxtaposition of the bloodshed that was taking place along the Gaza border, contrasted with the celebration going around the Jerusalem embassy. And this is the worst day of bloodshed in Gaza in 4 years. Now, down in Turkey, Erdogan is very upset about what's going on. And he's pointing his finger at the United Nations, saying that the United Nations has collapsed in the face of the Gaza violence. Once again, they're not going to do anything about Israel. And Erdogan is saying the United Nations is finished. If they don't act over the Gaza killings, if they don't act to rein in this rogue state of Israel, the United Nations is finished, and that's going to open a very dangerous door, because the United Nations is supposed to exist to keep all the nations of the world talking to each other, not resorting to war. It hasn't worked in the case of Israel, or for that matter, the United States. But if the United Nations is completely discredited by this, and it looks like that's going to happen, then nations are going to go back to settling their differences the good old-fashioned way with bombs and bullets. The Turkish foreign minister Mevlut Cavusoglu is saying that Israel should be taken to the International Criminal Court over the Gaza massacre. And yes, they should be. Now, Israel is still trying to maintain that they were in a war situation, that all those protesters were terrorists and they were threatening to come across the border, come into Israel, and start killing the Jewish people with their flags and placards, apparently. Death by paper cut, I guess. But if Israel wants to take that position, they have still committed a war crime with the use of those expanding bullets, because those are banned in warfare. The kind of ammunition that is used in war is very carefully controlled by international treaty. But this is turning out to be Israel's Amritsar. And the world is turning against them very much. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, up in Russia, their foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, is criticizing Israel for its propaganda against the people of Gaza, trying to justify the Bloody Monday massacre. And it says it's ridiculous to call these Palestinians terrorists, which is what Israel is saying. They're all terrorists, therefore it's okay for us to shoot them. And Lavrov said, this is a blasphemous statement. You can't claim that dozens of peaceful civilians, including children and infants, are all terrorists. There was that 8-month-old baby who died from tear gas. Was he a terrorist too? Now, Israel's Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is out there saying that the Hamas leaders are a bunch of cannibals. I guess they've worn out anti-Semite and nobody's buying they're all terrorists. So now it's down to cannibals. They're Nazis and terrorists and cannibals and they dress funny and they have ugly dogs, really ugly dogs. That's what it's looking like to the rest of the world with all this excuse making. Up in Canada, Justin Trudeau is calling for an independent probe of the reported use of excessive force in Gaza shootings, mostly motivated by the fact that a Canadian doctor was among the injured. And he issued a statement. Canada deplores and is gravely concerned about the violence in the Gaza Strip that has led to a tragic loss of life and injured countless people. We are appalled that Dr. Tarek Loubani, a Canadian doctor, is among the wounded, along with so many unarmed people, including civilians, members of the media, first responders, and children. And it sounds really good, but I'm willing to bet a Canadian nickel that he backs off within a week. Because the Israeli lobby is just as powerful in Canada as it is down here. Now, the New York Times actually wrote a relatively balanced story about what's going on. They had a story that came on out about how an uneasy calm falls over Gaza after Israel kills scores in protests. They didn't use the word clashes to make it sound like it was equal on both sides. You know, clash makes it sound like the Palestinians were actually in hand-to-hand combat with the Israeli soldiers, which of course didn't really happen. Hamas has called for a general strike. And again, that is a recognized form of peaceful protest. Gandhi used it to tremendous effect to get Britain out of India here. Well, the New York Times may have spoken too soon about an uneasy calm because Israeli Defense Forces have launched yet another airstrike in Gaza. And Israel is claiming they're only bombing Hamas targets, which they always say. And apparently they're claiming this was justified because somebody fired a machine gun somewhere near Sderot. They don't know who fired the machine gun. Could have even been an Israeli. But they're going on in and pounding on them even more. Now, you probably saw these videos of drones that were hovering over the Palestinian protesters, dropping gas bombs and incendiary devices on their tents. And apparently Israel was testing their latest drones in this circumstance. The situation between the Palestinians and the Israelis is somewhat equated to David versus Goliath, but in this case, Goliath doesn't even have to show up to the battlefield. Just sits and pushes a button, and the little robot goes on out and does what they want it to do. But there were apparently 3 types of drones being used to disperse the gas. And as you probably saw in that one video, one of them was actually brought down with a slingshot. David and Goliath for real here. Meanwhile, Israel's abuses of Palestinians continue in other parts of that country, and apparently there's now a thriving business in Israel dealing in stolen land, stolen from the Palestinians. And apparently locals are buying land from the illegal settlements, because they'll declare, a buffer zone. They have land they're not actually building on. And locals will buy that land very cheap. After all, it didn't cost the settlers anything. And then they resell it to Americans and other people who want to live in the Holy Lands, who want to live in the settlements. They believe in the right of return. So again, it's just outright theft of their land. Now, all of it illegal under international law. Just like Israel's occupation of the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is still legally part of Syria. Israel's occupying it and sucking out all the oil and gas that they can. Now, the pro-Israel social media users have been circulating a video to claim that Hamas is exaggerating the number of dead, because in the video you see people who are wrapped up, and a couple of them are moving. Now, the video was actually of a protest, a mock funeral that was held at a university all the way back in 2013. And Israel keeps recycling this as anti-Palestinian propaganda to say, oh, not that many people were killed. They did it in 2014 when Israel's Operation Protective Edge war on Gaza saw more than 2,200 Palestinians killed, more than 1,462 of whom were civilians, according to the United Nations. So the lies are out there, and it's just escalating the situation. It's escalating the anger, because we know it's all lies. And a senior Israeli army spokesman has admitted that this is a public relations nightmare, that they badly mismanaged it, that they really killed too many people, and it's gotten the world's attention. This is Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, international spokesman and head of the social media for the Israeli Defense Forces. And he basically said Hamas has won the PR war by a knockout. I don't think that's what happened. I think Israel basically destroyed its own image, along with all those people along the Gaza border. So people are very upset, and the more that Israel does to Gaza, like the bombing, the worse it is. It makes it look like Israel is completely unrepentant about what they've done, and they're just going to go on in and kill more people. This thing is a public relations nightmare. It is so bad. Up at the Cannes Film Festival, many of the stars and celebrities are speaking out. Some of them, when they walk down the red carpet, were carrying signs about ending the killing in Gaza. And these are people who are normally intimidated into never saying anything bad about Israel. And even they are speaking out. Article out of the American Conservative, Get Ready for the New Middle East Battlefield, the Golan, which is exactly where hostilities erupted following Trump's announcement that he was pulling out of the Iran deal. Israel launched an attack onto Syria from the Golan about an hour after the announcement. Syria retaliated into the Golan. Israel attacked again. So yeah, it's yet another flashpoint. It's yet another place where war is breaking out. Over at the Washington Examiner, normally they're a resource I will use from time to time, but there's this guy called Tom Rogan, and he wrote a piece about that new bridge connecting Russia and Crimea, And he literally came on out and said, Ukraine should just blow the bridge up. And he's basically encouraging war between Ukraine and Russia, or at the very least, he's encouraging terrorist activity against civilian infrastructure. But that's what's coming on out there. They want to bomb the bridge. They're not ready to recognize the will of the Crimean people. The official story is still that Russia stole Crimea. That's not what happened. Following the coup d'etat that took Yanukovych out of power and put in Poroshenko, the people of Crimea held a referendum, and they said, we're not part of Ukraine anymore. And they have that right under the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which has been signed by every member of the UN, including the United States. Then they held a second referendum about joining with the Russian Federation. That one won. They both won by landslide votes. And that's what actually happened. But the U.S. has stamped its feet and taken the position they don't recognize the right of the Crimean people to have a referendum. And that's like a guest at a wedding refusing to recognize the bride's right to choose that particular groom. Therefore, by default, the groom has kidnapped and raped the bride. That's how silly the thinking is. We're going to take a phone call. Steve Elkins, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, the United Nations, I agree with you. Something has to be done at the United Nations to condemn Israel's action here, the brutality, what they're doing. They are not living up to their mission statements, what they were created for. Do you think we're going to see people leaving, countries leaving the UN? Do you think we're going to see that happen?
We might actually start to see that happen. The United Nations really doesn't seem to be serving any purpose that serves the member nations. It's embarked on a path of interfering in their internal affairs more and more, especially on the issue of global warming. And I think a lot of nations are not thrilled about being in the UN. They may be staying because it's a status symbol. Basically says you're first world. But I expect that there will be a resolution by the General Assembly against Israel, but the United States can't veto a General Assembly resolution. But then again, the General Assembly has no enforcement power. They can't do anything about it. So,
yeah, it always seems like the United States has a super vote when it comes down to vetoing in the United Nations. Am I correct? Is that the wrong assumption there? It seems like they have the final say on anything. Probably because they fund the whole thing.
Well, they don't fund the whole thing. In fact, right now, the United States is seriously in arrears on the money it's supposed to be paying the United Nations. There are all of the permanent members of the Security Council have the right to veto. I don't know what the situation is for the rotating members, if they have a veto or not, but the permanent members certainly do. And the United States has just habitually used their veto to protect Israel from the consequences of its actions. Everybody knows it. Everybody sees it. It's getting really old. People are sick and tired of it.
Well, they're clearly not living up to their potential, what they're supposed to be doing. I would see no benefit in actually being in the UN if I were a country to say, we're out of here. Our voice isn't being heard. And I hope there are some countries that finally stand up and say, that's it. We're done with this. This is a very biased organization. I mean, these are clear atrocities, what's happening in Palestine. And I'd say in the next 5 years, if this continues, maybe it'd be shorter than that, maybe 5 years, if the Israelis continue to push back the Palestinians to take more land, Palestine will no longer exist in 5 years. It'll be gone. There'll be no land left.
That's
It'll all
what
be
Israel
under
wants.
Israeli control.
That's what Israel wants. It's Israel that's wiping Palestine off of the map. And they've been trying to insist there never really was a Palestine, even though it's on historical maps dating back, 1,000 years, if not more. Steve, stay on the line. Going to put you on hold for commercials, and we'll get right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Steve Elkins. We're talking about the absolute paralysis over at the United Nations in the face of Israel's continued crimes and aggressions, not just against the Palestinians, not just against Gaza and the West Bank, but against Syria, Lebanon, all of their neighbors. And I do have a source who's actually inside the UN who says you would not believe how corrupted the entire institution has become.
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing. It is very disturbing. I just wish other neighboring countries would see the big picture here and actually, you know, if they step up, they start voicing opposition to this too late, it's going to be too late for them also because they'll be invaded next. They're just, you know, hop, skip, and a jump to take over another country. They should, the writing is on the wall in this. I mean, if you look at the map in 1949 of how much land that Palestine actually had and how little they have now, it's a sliver of what they actually had. And I'm shocked that nothing's really being done about it. But yeah, on top of that, I sent you an email today, and I think you got it. It was about South Carolina being the first state to have new legislation starting on July 1st of this year about new rules, new laws on anti-Semitism, I guess starting with the high schools and the universities. And I said to myself, well, I guess anybody who condemns the actions of Israel, of course, they're going to use that label, you're being anti-Semitic. But, of course, that doesn't fit. They're just, you know, redefining the term itself, and which would put you and I in some serious trouble, I guess, if other states go through with that also to say, yes, you can't condemn that because that's now anti-Semitism. Independent media is going to be in trouble. We're going to have to, you know, stand our ground on this issue. But I'm surprised.
Somebody needs to challenge this law and take it to the Supreme Court because it is clearly a violation of our First Amendment. And by the way, the use of the phrase anti-Semite is inappropriate here because those Palestinians are also Semitic people.
Right. Hey, that's it, Mike. Hey, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Over in Syria, the Syrian army has finished liberating the Rastan pocket, and they're advancing in southern Damascus, and apparently the ISIS defense is collapsing. So that war is pretty much over, barring another false flag chemical weapon attack followed by a U.S./Israeli invasion. Because Israel doesn't want to give the Golan back. They just want to keep it because of all that oil and gas. And also the plan for Eretz Israel, the Greater Israel project here. Now, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons has looked at a chemical attack that took place in the Syrian town of Sarakeb back in February and confirmed the presence of chlorine. But in line with its mandate, the OPCW does not assign blame. Although we know that the U.S.-backed rebels have been staging these chemical attacks, especially with chlorine, in order to try and frame Assad to justify military intervention. Vladimir Putin has announced that the Russian cruise missile-armed ships that are patrolling the Mediterranean will remain there off the coast of Syria to prevent a terrorist comeback. Now, what he's really sending is a message to the Western powers. Don't even think about invading, because terrorists don't come by sea. You don't use cruise missiles on terrorists. But that's what's really going on. They're going to keep their naval presence in the Mediterranean as a deterrent to more U.S. adventurism in Syria. Getting on over to Korea, things there are very, very dynamic. And as Ryan Dawson mentioned when he called into the show yesterday, North Korea was actually okay with the South Korea-U.S. military exercises, but he said there's one thing you should not do, and that's practice nuclear strikes on North Korea. And it is very disingenuous that while the U.S. was talking of peace, they did go ahead and fly nuclear-capable planes right up to the edge of North Korea. And that set Kim Jong-un off, obviously, along with Bolton's ridiculous upfront demands. And so, yeah, it looks like the U.S., for all the talk about peace, what they want is North Korea under their total control. And Bolton is out there basically just pouring fuel on the fire. And his comment about a Libya-style solution working with North Korea got the North Korean government very angry. And North Korea said, they know too well that North Korea is neither Libya nor Iraq, which met miserable fates. So they have been paying attention to what's going on. If you give up your weapons of deterrence, you will get invaded by the United States. It is a foolish thing to do. Story coming out of CNBC about how North Korea is unlikely to withdraw from the talks with President Trump. And I'm not sure I really agree with that, because if they wanted to go back to talks, they would talk with South Korea before they talked with Trump. But we'll see what's going to happen. It's coming up real soon. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're already starting to see a propaganda campaign ramp up against North Korea. Over at the Washington Times, they're running an article saying that the reason Kim Jong-un is now balking at meetings with South Korea and may delay the Trump meeting is he's buying time to hide his nuclear weapons. And this makes absolutely no sense. If North Korea has hidden nuclear weapons, they hid them a long time ago, back when the United States started pushing this issue. So I dropped this story into the category of more bovine excrement here. China has unleashed a new military drill called Island Encirclement around Taiwan. In other words, they're practicing on establishing a naval blockade of the entire island. Taiwan, of course, is not very happy about that, and they're accelerating development on their new missile-carrying stealthy catamarans. This is the Tuo-Chiang-class missile corvettes, and the first one is basically built for air defense missions. So everybody's ramping up over there. The new defense bill here in the United States is seeking $7.5 billion, that's with a B, for Taiwan and the U.S. to push back on China. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but in the corporate media, there have been all these stories about how China's a bigger threat than Russia. China's got this and China's got that. And I'm getting a strong sense that these maniacs in charge of this country really think they can take on Russia and China and win without inflicting huge amounts of damage to this country. Because in a global war, especially a nuclear war, nobody wins except possibly the bankers. Very interesting article that came out of UNS.com talking about the ruinously expensive American military and pointing out about how Republican politicians are complaining that entitlements cost too much, by which they mean pensions, medical care, things like that. And they're complaining that the entitlements are leading the country to bankruptcy, even as they fatten spending on the Pentagon, which now takes 12% of the overall budget, and probably it's actually a little bit more, because some of that funding is covert. It's hidden in, like, the Department of Agriculture. But everybody in Washington, D.C. is caught up in the war groupthink. And it alarms me that they actually think they can win a nuclear war. And if they're wrong, obviously you and I and our children will find out about it first. Okay. The Chief of Staff of the French Navy, Admiral Christophe Prezac, is out there saying that the latest Russian submarines are incredibly fast and silent, making it hard to detect them. And he's also talking about the sudden expansion of the Chinese war fleet. Over the last 4 years, China has added 80 warships to its war fleet. And he went on to say, all of this points to the inability of France and the fleets of other NATO countries to defend the leading position of the alliance in the world. That's their issue. They want to still be in control of the world. Now, Russia's state-of-the-art hypersonic glide vehicle, even the U.S. experts are saying it's capable of easily cutting through the existing U.S. missile shield. It's capable of evading pretty much everything we have out there to protect our fleets. And they're estimating this weapon will become operational by 2020. I'm expecting it'll be ready a lot sooner than that, but that's just my opinion. But over at CNBC, sources, the usual anonymous sources, said the Russian military successfully tested the weapon twice in 2016. The third known test of the weapon was carried out in October of 2017. That one failed when the device crashed seconds before hitting its target. And the sources are saying the device would be a significant breakthrough which could enable the Russian military to surpass its U.S. counterparts. Now, the question we should all be asking is not why the Russians have this technology, but why, with all of the vast sums of money spent on the military-industrial complex, the U.S. military does not. They've been working on hypersonic technology going back to the 1980s, and they're not there yet. They're still years away from having anything they can get up there. And it's because the focus of the Pentagon is spending vast sums of money in rebuilding the weapons that won World War II. And Russia and China are thinking outside the box or outside the war, and they're building the weapons with which World War III will be fought. Over at the State Department, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was delivering a pep talk to the State Department staff. And here's where it gets a little weird out there. He's telling them to regain their swagger and believe in the essential rightness of the United States in global affairs. And this is very scary. He's out there selling this idea that no matter what the United States does, the United States is right, I guess because we've got the bigger bombs or more of them. But that's what the propaganda is being fed to those staffers at the State Department. We're always right. No matter how wrong we are always right. Imperial hubris on display here. All right, let's turn to the domestic politics because there's a lot of very interesting developments. Over at the Department of Justice, the Inspector General, Horowitz, is getting ready to release his final report looking into the handling of the investigation of Hillary Clinton's private email server. This is not an investigation of Hillary, it's an investigation of the FBI and the Department of Justice, and this report is expected to be a barn burner. There are already leaks coming on out saying that Horowitz found reasonable grounds that the FBI violated federal criminal law in the Bureau's handling of the Hillary investigation. And apparently, Horowitz has referred the findings to Hoover for possible criminal prosecution. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both. And I hope you're staying chilled.
I'm sorry?
Tell you what, as far as that scenario goes with Nikki Haley and her storming out of the UN and so forth, ad nauseum, you know something? They got the wrong name header of the country that she is from.
Yes.
It really should have been Israel, not the U.S.
Yes. She's Israel's third
Especially
ambassador.
I'm sorry?
She's Israel's third ambassador to the United Nations.
Well, go figure. They can battle out who is number one later, but quite frankly, I think it's very evident she has proven and shown herself to be, some people are going to disagree with it, that's fine, basically a paid whore for Israel. Anyway, enough out of me. Later.
All right. Well, I'm not going to argue with you on that, but right now, pretty much our entire federal government is a paid whore for Israel, along with the legislature in South Carolina. So Israel takes all that money sent to them by the Congress, and then they bring some of it back to the United States in order to basically donate to members of elected office who will continue to support Israel. It's a giant kickback scheme is what's going on here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing? Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah, Mike, it seems like the Israeli people are going to have to wake up because Netanyahu and his group of thugs and the Zionists are their worst enemy. Not Iran or Hamas or the Palestinians. It's themselves. It's themselves, Mike.
Yes.
And until the Israeli people wake up, there was a protest by Israelis against what's going on, but it's not big enough. It needs to be huge, kind of like during the Vietnam days, huge, when they just had enough, and once Netanyahu's out and they kick out the Lieberman vice president or whatever, he's in charge of the defense minister, I believe, right?
Yes.
Once they kick these people out, and they got to kick the Zionists all out of there, that's what they got to do, and let them go find a home on an island somewhere. We'll build a wall around them on the island.
The Nazis wanted to give the Jews Madagascar. There are actually medals commemorating cooperation between the Nazi Party and the Zionist leadership. They were actually getting along quite well, contrary to what you're taught in school. And when the Zionist leadership said, we want a country of our own and we want to leave Germany, the Germans said, fine, at the end of the war, when we conquered all of Africa, we'll give you Madagascar. And the Zionists said, no, we obviously want Palestine. We want the Holy Land.
I want to switch gears, Mike, to Russia. I believe from what I read, the S-500 is getting close to going to production. I think they got a couple of things to finish up with that. And the Eurasian Economic Union, did you see Moldova? Right now they're an observer, but they're getting close to joining that. And remember, Singapore, Egypt, obviously Russia, India, and you know who else is Armenia. The new president's looking at maybe he's going to join the union. Now, Armenia just had those problems with all the protests staged and stuff, but it seems like maybe that didn't work out completely, huh?
Yeah, it looks like it.
So, you see between that and the Petro Yuan and stuff, and now Europe, maybe they're going to grow a little spine, especially France. They shouldn't speak up because if Total loses that oil, the gas deal in Iran, the Chinese are just going to grab the other 50%. So they'll have 80% of the gas field in Iran, somewhere close to that. And that would be a loss for France, and that would hurt France economically big time.
Yes, it would.
So you see how now they're caught. Europe is caught. They got caught basically in their own trap. they got nowhere to go. Unless they decide to be their own man. Maybe just Germany and France will go. Britain will probably stick with the U.S. I can't see them not. But if Germany and France go, Mike, doesn't that mean like the EU, that's basically the EU holding it up, just those two countries.
That's basically it. Once Britain breaks free, Germany is probably going to go. Poland and Hungary are very angry at the open borders agenda forced on them by Brussels. They may decide they're not part of the EU anymore, which is going to be kind of interesting because they're completely surrounded by it. But it does look like it's all falling apart. And what really alarms me is the extreme short-sightedness of the U.S. foreign policy, where Trump, first of all, moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and then he pulled out of the Iran deal without considering the repercussions that it was going to have, even for our closest allies. And this has driven a tremendous wedge between the United States and the European Union.
But if you look, Mike, Assad was in Sochi today, right? I believe.
Yes.
But Angela Merkel, that's the second time in a short period of time. So something's going on because she wouldn't have fly there twice, within this short amount of time to meet Putin. So there's movement going on.
Yes.
I don't know what it is, but there's something going on, you know, because she wouldn't have run over there for no reason. So we shall see. All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Generally speaking, I believe that there is more global centralized control than you, but I will grant you that definitely in this case, where we have Netanyahu bromance with Trump, and then we also have the conflict where there is Zionist influence over the Western media, and then the Western media hating Trump. So you definitely got a great example there of two very strong opposing interests, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Is the Western media going to still hate Trump when the boss of that media, loves Trump now?
Well, it's not the entire Western media that hates Donald Trump. It's the United States corporate media, who are very much on board with the liberal agenda. And for whatever reason, they've been pushing the propaganda about the Trump-Russia collusion. But that's starting to unwind, and I'm getting a sense that the corporate media wants to sort of back away from the story and distance themselves before it all starts to fall apart.
Yeah, that seems to be what's happening. You know the cliche about the American nuclear submarine, the irony of how they're exporting democracy, but life on a submarine is a complete dictatorship? You heard of that?
It should be that way basically on any Navy ship or Army base or aircraft. You need a chain of command, and you need a crew that is going to basically obey orders quickly, because that's the only way you're going to survive.
I do understand that. It's something that's right. I understand that. It's just something that's referred to casually. That there's kind of a apparent contradiction there. I just wanted to point out that the solution to that contradiction is in 3 words: not exporting democracy.
Well, we haven't been exporting democracy. I mean, when you look at all these interventions going back to the end of World War II, they were all sold on the claim that we're bringing democracy to these people, but not one genuine democracy ever resulted from a successful U.S. intervention. There was always a tyrant, like the Shah of Iran or the dictator Pinochet. It was just a lie for public consumption.
Totally. And if I could just switch gears, I wanted to just say something about the Canadian oil prices. By the way, how much are you paying for gas over there? You go by the gallon, right?
$3.40 a gallon here. And Mateus, I'm going to have to put you on hold for a commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're still talking with Mateus in Canada. And Mateus, you had something you wanted to add.
Right. So you're paying about $3.40 a gallon?
Yes.
Okay. So 4 liters in a gallon approximately. We're paying $1.60 a liter right now, so that's $5.40 or $5.60, something like that.
And it's going to get a lot worse.
I just wanted to explain something to any Canadians listening, and also just to let you know of what scam is going on here, and hopefully it doesn't happen to you. So what happened is back when oil was $100 about 4 years ago, we were paying about $1 a liter. Then it went down to $20 a gallon about a year later. Guess what? We're still paying $1 a liter. Okay? What happened was that the refineries just said, oh, you know what? Let's just double or triple our profits from now on. Totally scam. Yes. So we just paid the same high rate while you guys and everyone else was enjoying the small benefit of all this political global corruption that we just happened to get an accidental benefit to the people of low gas prices. We didn't get that because the refineries were just upping their take. And then I predicted this. What would happen is that then when the prices started going back up again, the refineries are not going to say, okay, let's just go back to where we were. They're saying this is the new normal, and now we're paying $1.60 a liter. It's such a fraud and a complete scam. And the reason to get away with it is because we're kind of pacified. We still have some weapons, but we're psychologically disarmed quite a bit. We get away with it because we don't do anything about it. It's so frustrating that we just sit on our ass and, what? When are we going to get off our ass and do something about it? When it's $1.80? When it's $2 a liter? We're talking right now, we're approaching $6 a gallon here, and no one's even complaining about it.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's my rant. That's why we have high prices in Canada, because we're all a bunch of wimps that aren't willing to resist just a bunch of cattle going along with it.
Well,
and it's
anybody who sells a commodity, the old model used to be your cost to provide plus a reasonable profit markup. And now today, of course, it's basically charging what the market will pay. And unfortunately, because people are dependent on gasoline for their cars, refineries and oil companies can get away from that. That's why they have so much money. They're also a very powerful lobbying group within the United States. And it is an issue. Of course, Claire and I are lucky because we both home office, so we don't actually do a lot of driving. Basically to shop and Claire's church. Saturday we have yet another memorial to go to. But other than that, we basically stay at home. So the gas price is not as big an impact on us as it is on people who have to drive into Honolulu every day for their job.
Yeah, it's tempting to get an electric vehicle, but the electrical prices are pretty high all over the world. And a Canadian government got elected partially on promising to freeze electrical increase rate, which they totally... talk to you later. Thank you.
Matthias, I'm sorry. I got to let you go for station identification. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And it's official. Bloody Gina Haspel has been confirmed as the new director of the Central Intelligence Agency. We are hearing now from sources in the White House that Donald Trump's team is ready to start putting pressure on Mueller now that the investigation has gone on for a year and come up with nothing except a porn star. And they're saying it's time to shut it down. And they want to put pressure on Mueller to say, if you've got something, keep going. If you don't have anything, after all this time and all this money, it's time to let it go on. Or it's time to let it go. And Giuliani is out there thinking that Mueller is just stalling for time so that this investigation into Trump-Russia collusion can be used for propaganda purposes on the midterm elections end of this year. So, he thinks it's absurd that might possibly happen. And it is time for it to shut down. They didn't find anything. It was all set up. It was all a frame-up. You've got the Department of Justice Inspector General who is basically recommending criminal prosecutions of the FBI. So the whole system is just rotted to the core. Now, it's come on out. This is from the Political Insider. James Comey used a secret program to obtain warrants on the Trump campaign without the approval of a judge. And they did it using what are called national security letters, which is a secret type of subpoena. And basically, it's a letter from the FBI that says, you will do this and you won't tell anybody that we had this deal. They're secret orders that the FBI uses on a regular basis to obtain sensitive electronic data and phone records. There is actually no basis in law for a national security letter. It's a complete bluff to get around the civil protections built into the system. I first started hearing about them back in the 1990s. They were being used to execute prior restraint on the media over certain stories. But there's no basis in law for any of them. It's thuggery. It's the FBI acting like a modern-day Gestapo. You will do what we say, or bad things will happen to you. Now, the claims being put forward that law enforcement, or a law enforcement official, he's come forward admitting he's the person who leaked Michael Cohen's financial records. And he's trying to justify what he did by saying that there was $3 million in payments that vanished from an ultra-secure federal database. And there must be some kind of a cover-up. Now, this official, who's not been revealed, was interviewed by The New Yorker and basically said that 2 reports detailing Cohen's financial activity vanished from a government database. or those reports were never in the database because this is yet another attempt at a frame-up to get Cohen to roll on Donald Trump. We have a video that's on the front of whatreallyhappened.com, and you should take a serious look at it before you decide not to vote in the midterm elections in November. Maxine Waters was out there basically saying that if the Democrats can take the House of Representatives and the Senate, they will vote through a bill for slavery reparations. That's how desperate the Democrats are right now. They're playing that reparations card. We're going to take money away from the white people and we're going to give it to the black people to make up for the curse of slavery. Forgetting, of course, that no black alive was ever a slave in the antebellum South, and no white person alive was ever a slave owner. They're trying to play that collective guilt. Well, just because you're white, you share in the sin. But that's what Maxine Waters is out there promising. Slavery reparations. So it's not bad enough that they're taking your money to give to illegal immigrants. They're taking your money to give to these refugees. Now they want to take your money to give to the black people over something that happened before all of us were born. That's a pretty desperate reach. And I'll tell you how ridiculous this all is. I mentioned this story before. My family, my ancestors on my mother's side of the family, actually ran a station on the Underground Railroad, helping escaped slaves get to Canada. Because even though slavery was banned in the northern states, the slaves were still considered the property of the plantations and had to be returned when caught. So the Underground Railroad was set up to basically hide these escaped slaves during the daytime, and at night they would move to the next station on the railroad. And my ancestor's station was 2 days away from the Canadian border. So what would happen if I went up to Canada and I located the descendants of those slaves that my ancestors helped to freedom, and I stood on their front porch demanding reparations or compensation? They would laugh me off the porch, and they'd be perfectly right to do so. I had nothing to do with the running of the Underground Railroad. Had I been alive back then, I probably would have. But I wasn't alive then. I'm alive now. And I had nothing whatsoever to do with it. I do not believe in this concept of collective guilt. I do not accept responsibility for things that happened before I was born. I do not accept responsibility for bad things that happened beyond my control. And we all need to start thinking like that, or Maxine Waters is going to plunder us all to buy the black vote again. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Apparently, over the last year, CNN has lost nearly 30% of their viewership. They're losing control. They're losing audience. They're losing ad revenues. The other day, Alex Jones was saying CNN may actually change their brand because it's become so damaged. Meanwhile, our numbers are through the roof here in the independent media. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, hello, Mike. I just want to say that, I'm disgusted with Bloody Gina being confirmed. And I just want, didn't Rand Paul say he was going to filibuster? Do you have any idea whether he did or not? And the other thing...
I don't think he did.
He sold out then. He sold out for the second time, and Pompeo also. Because I think he could defeat Trump in a primary or form a third party where he could combine with somebody like a Cynthia McKinney. But what I also wanted to say is, with Trump, I think his main problem is the man is just stupid. More and more when I watch him, I just think he's just incapable of being of the office he holds. Because if you look at Bloody Gina, she's part of that cabal with Brennan and Clapper and a whole bunch, and and the FBI, Comey. She should realize this. Instead, he stands up for this witch. I just don't, like I said, I get the feeling the man is either a total liar and was lying completely when he ran, or he's just too dumb to be president. Well, maybe it's a combination of both. I don't know. I'll wait for your answer on that.
Well, there are people who are saying that in watching Trump read official documents, that sometimes he does get lost. So there may be an issue there, that he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But compounding that is the fact it's become very obvious he's very easy to manipulate. He's surrounded by manipulators. He's susceptible to flattery. And yeah, it's ridiculous to have Gina Haspel as the head of the CIA, because the former head of the CIA was part of that group that was trying to bring Trump down, and she was his assistant.
Right.
So it hasn't improved anything at all.
No, he just makes one. And why did he put somebody, a bum like Bolton, in there as his national security advisor? Why did he get rid of Flynn in the first place? He should never have given in. First of all, he said he lied to Pence. He shouldn't even let Flynn talk to Pence. He should have told Pence, you stay in the background. General Flynn is dealing with me. He's doing what I expect him to do, and that's to try to make friends with the Russians. Can you imagine? Personally, I think we should withdraw from the Middle East, Europe, and everywhere else in the four corners of the world. But if we do have to be there, could you imagine now if we were actually cooperating and working with Putin? We would be able to control both of these out-of-control psychopaths, Netanyahu and Erdogan, there in Turkey. And the place would probably be better off right now. There'd probably be more peace rather than a place looking like every day it's going to erupt more and more into a war. And Saudi Arabia, too. We would have money. They would at least probably listen to two superpowers work together. Instead, Putin is trying to be everything to everybody, from what I gather. He's trying to be the great statesman in the world, but it's just not working. You can't get a psychopath like Netanyahu into Russia, okay, think you're going to deal with him, or make a deal with another psychopath like Erdogan, and think you're going to get anywhere. It just doesn't work. It's like me keeping a rattlesnake as a pet and letting it run around the house and thinking sooner or later it's not going to bite me or my dog. I mean, it's crazy. You know, that's what's sooner going to happen, because they're not capable of thinking any other way, and they're not, it's not like a mammal or something you have a pet. Sooner or later, it's a reptile, and it's going to bite.
Yes.
Okay, and it's a poisonous reptile. So the same thing with that. If you think you're going to deal with reptilians, I don't mean it like David Icke means. I mean, as a facsimile. If you're dealing with two reptiles like a Netanyahu and an Erdogan, or that other Mohammed bin Salman, when you're dealing with people like that, you're not going to get anywhere. It's just not going to work unless both superpowers are working together and make it clear to cool your jets, get out of there, leave people alone, don't attack countries like Syria, don't gun down innocent people, at the borders, you could. They could, he could. It's so easy. I was a peace officer in New York and a correctional officer in Texas. I think I told you that before.
Yes.
You can easily use CS gas, pepper spray to disperse the most hostile crowd. Believe me, we've done it, and I've been, and I've also, been tested on both of these sprays. You're not going to feel like doing anything when you get this. I've seen sometimes even with pepper spray, which is not even as strong as CS. I've seen people, grown men, big, strong men, actually break down just from the effects of that pepper spray. Start crying and all kinds of stuff. Never affected me like that, but believe me, I also didn't. I think I was not going to engage in any demonstrations or anything like that either. All right.
Yes.
And especially not with CS, because that takes your breath away. I mean, it really is tough. Okay, it's I started heaving from it. I mean, it's throwing and that's just going through a small cloud of CS. So they could have used that, and they did use it. There's no reason for a live fire on civilians, on unarmed civilians. Now they come and say, well, they were armed. No, they weren't. That's BS. That's, they weren't armed at all. This is out of control. And where's Trump calling? I'm still waiting for him to call Netanyahu an animal, like he did for Assad for that false flag there with the gas. Okay, I'm still waiting for that. So far, I haven't heard it. Maybe you heard it. I don't know. Did you?
Nope.
Netanyahu's an animal? No, I guess it's not going to come out of Trump's mouth, is it?
No, it's not
Well,
going to come out of his
pretty
mouth
much
here.
all I got.
And by the way, that animal situation, what he said was MS-13, the gang are animals, and they really are. And the liberals are so desperate to attack him that they said, how dare you call the illegal immigrants and refugees animals? And they took the comment entirely out of context. And now the White House is basically pushing back and saying, no, I was talking about the MS-13. And all these liberals are so desperate to get Trump, they were willing to basically throw their support behind one of the most violent gangs now operating in the United States.
Oh, I know that. I mean, but at the same time, that same media didn't say a thing about calling the president of Syria a man who's protecting the people of Syria, including Christians, Muslims, Shiites, Sunnis, Kurds, and what's that other people called? I forget. They're also in Lebanon. Like, there's all kinds of different minorities, and he's protecting them all. Yazidis, okay, and yet they're going to call a great man like this an animal, okay? Or they're going to call Putin a murderer, whatever other stuff they say. But it's not okay to call a vicious street gang like MS-13, and believe me, they are a vicious. Like I said, I've worked in the prisons long enough. Okay, They are a vicious street gang. I mean, they'll cut your throat as soon as look at you. So I mean, but that's bad to call them animals. Okay, personally, I think it's an insult to animals. Call them that. Okay? My dog.
Yeah, we're already getting emails from various life forms saying I'm insulted.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even they say, but I know the way he meant it for animals. But the fact of the matter is that MS-13 is like demonic. That's almost a demonic street gang.
Yes.
Matter of fact, if I had to guess, they probably believe they're doing a devil's work. I wouldn't be surprised if they're Satanists. Okay? I mean, just look at them. I mean, they are bloodthirsty vermin. Even the American gangs, the gangs that have been here for years, are afraid of them.
I mean, MS-13 makes the Crips and the Bloods look like choir boys.
Exactly. I mean, you think you're about to have choir practice when the Crips and the Bloods get back together, compared to these guys. I mean, these are cutthroat, vicious scum. There's no other way to put it. So, but that's okay. They get upset about him calling them animals, but it's okay for them to call one of the greatest statesmen in the world today, President Assad, a man who I think will go down in history as the Abe Lincoln of Syria, maybe of the Middle East, one of these days, because he's facing a lot of the same problems Lincoln faced with the Civil War, with other countries trying to interfere. Remember, Britain tried to interfere with the United States. One of the reasons for the Emancipation Proclamation, a lot of people don't realize, is it would make Britain really feel guilty about going in there and helping the helping slaveholders. When Lincoln was trying to free the slaves,
but their target was the greenback. When Lincoln basically financed the Union Army with a government-issued debt-free note, it sent shockwaves through the European banking families. And how dare you not borrow from one of our banks? We get to print up the banknotes, not you, even though the Constitution says otherwise. And that's why so many of those European nations wanted to come into the American Civil War on the side of the Confederacy to basically erase Lincoln and his idea of a greenback from the face of the earth. And if it hadn't been for Russia, they would have invaded.
I was just going to mention that about Russia. Even back then, Russia was actually on our side and warned Britain. So I don't think Britain would have invaded after once the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. I think that would have been too much for them. But one thing I can tell you this is the French took advantage. That's when they went into Mexico. That's when you think of Cinco de Mayo.
Yes.
If it wasn't before the Civil War, they wouldn't have dared. When we had the Monroe Doctrine,
yes,
they wouldn't have dared go into Mexico like that. They would have met not only resistance, they would have gotten a butt kick. But they took advantage because of the Civil War. So there's a lot in common when you look at our Civil War back then, and when you look at the Syrian Civil War today, if you want to even call it a Civil War. They're really under siege by terrorist organizations supplied by the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia and the British government. Okay, and that's all there's to it, Mike. I mean, I'm sorry. People need to do their own research. They'll find out everything I'm telling them is true, and you're telling them is true. Okay, that's all it takes. Just so that not even reading. All you got to do is go online. There's plenty of information.
Okay.
About all I got to say.
All right. Well, Mark, we're going to let you go here, and we've got another caller waiting on the line. Bill in Chicago, thank you for being so patient. What's on your mind?
You know, Mike, you always say you don't like to put whites and blacks and Jews in a category and single them out.
Yeah.
But yet you just singled out whites for slavery. You just singled out whites for slavery.
No, that's what Maxine Waters is. That's what Maxine Waters. Hang on. That's what Maxine Waters is doing. And the reality is that the percentage of people in the Confederacy who were slave owners was in the single digits. Most of the white people in the Confederacy did not own slaves. There were actually even black slave owners down there. Okay, I got to let you go here. We got to do a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, earlier in the program, we were reporting on how the Department of Justice Inspector General is about to release his report on the Department of Justice and FBI handling of Hillary's private email server. And apparently it includes compelling grounds, I think is the phrase they used, that the FBI violated federal criminal law in the way they covered up for Hillary Clinton. And it looks like maybe the Clinton machine is trying to get ahead of the propaganda, because if this report comes out, it's going to discredit the Department of Justice and the FBI. And with it, it's going to discredit everything that they were sticking their nose into, including the Trump-Russia collusion. So I just got an email here from a listener who is saying that on MSNBC TV News, they're claiming that the Trump-Russia connection has finally been exposed. I don't have any details about this, but there was nothing really there. And again, it's just a propaganda war. And it's not surprising that corporate TV news is not doing all that well, as demonstrated by CNN's fall from the heights. Let's talk about the economic news here for a little bit. As you know, Illinois is in serious economic trouble. Actually, most of the states are in serious economic trouble. In fact, it's probably easier to count the states that are not in serious trouble right now. Their pension system is empty, and right now to refill it, they're going to have to tax every resident for a grand total of $11,000 to refill it. And that's going to get a little bit uglier, because in Chicago, they're suffering from a staggering outbreak of violent crime. Remember, Chicago is held up as the model of gun control for the entire nation. Gun violence is there. People are being shot in the streets because nobody can fight back. And coupled with the already high taxes, and people are leaving the state. They're leaving these high-tax, democratically run areas and heading out to a more rural setting where they can have an easier life here. Last year, Illinois lost one resident every 4.3 minutes. We're actually seeing a population decline here in the island of Hawaii because of high taxation, bad roads, and our own problem with the homeless and refugees. Pardon me. Gentleman named Rosenberg, David Rosenberg, he's at Gluskin Chef and Associates, and he's out there basically saying that the Standard & Poor's 500 should be 1,000 points lower than it is today. And he's saying basically all asset classes have gone up, even ones that are inversely correlated, which suggests to me that, again, we're seeing a lot of rigging. And he thinks a breaking point might be a year away, and investors should start taking precautions now. I just took a peek on my iPhone, and all of the markets ended in the red. Not a lot, not jump off the building, but red, but still red here. Citi is warning that the surging oil prices could soon create a hostile environment for stocks. and they're looking at the price of crude and how it impacts not just the price of gasoline at the pump, but all kinds of industry and companies trucks, supply chain, all of those are going to have less profitability and are therefore a less desirable investment for people who invest in stocks. And that could result in some of these stocks being sold. There could be a real domino effect from a sudden jump in gas prices. Article out of Investment Research Dynamics asking if the wheels are coming off the economic system, and I would say a resounding yes. And they're looking at 10 years of money printing by the Federal Reserve has removed true price discovery from the markets. We have the worst overvalued stock market in U.S. history right now, far worse than it was preceding the Depression of the 1930s. And everything is so fragile, the market is reacting to just little tiny changes here and there that in past years would have just been taken in stride. It's the noise of the market here. The European Union has announced they're willing to block U.S. sanctions on Iran. In fact, apparently they have passed the legislation now to protect European Union companies who want to do business with Iran. So John Bolton's arm twisting did not work to keep them from doing business with Iran. Trump expected Iran to pull out of the deal. When D.C. pulled out of the deal, Iran did not, and is keeping the deal going with the rest of the P4+1. That's not what Trump expected. Somebody miscalculated badly there. And so now they're trying to basically arm twist the rest of the P4+1 to pull out of the deal as well. We're going to take a break for commercials, back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones. Kathleen in Paris, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. What's on my mind is the pension funds which are unfunded. And I'm thinking again about what Catherine Austin Fitts talked about. You know, there's this, how many trillions and trillions of dollars which are just missing?
Yes.
And don't know where it went. So sorry, missing this money. And her idea was that large municipalities and states could just refuse to pay the federal government because, they lost the money that we gave them already. So we're just going to hold on to this money that we should be paying you, and we're going to give it to the pension funds.
Well, that's a nice idea. Of course, it might prompt an invasion by the federal government into the states that do that. I mean, that was the main issue with the Confederacy, that Washington, D.C. was imposing more and more taxes on the southern states and their productivity. And that's finally what led to the Confederacy breaking away. And we remember what happened after that.
Well, it was just an idea.
Well, it is an idea, but again, Washington, D.C. is so desperate for money, they're not going to allow anybody to say, they're not going to allow any state to say, we're not sending you any more money until you find that missing $21 trillion, which if they could find, if it hasn't just been siphoned off for corruption, or if it's not the real Pentagon budget, there's another thought to be thinking about, that all that missing money is actually gone into the Pentagon, but they don't want to admit it.
But that's the only card we have, isn't it? The non-compliance. You said, don't fill out the paperwork. Don't cooperate. Don't sign. Isn't that
yeah, we're getting to that time where the American people may just decide they're ready to do that.
I hope so. I don't see any other cards that we've got.
Well, again, my prediction is that the economy is going to implode, and that the federal government is going to collapse the way the former Soviet Union did, and we just need to be ready to get through that period of turmoil that will follow while we set up a new government, mostly based on the original Constitution and the first 13 amendments.
Yeah, but isn't that one of the ways they did it? I mean, this non-compliance and non-cooperation, and
That's how India broke free from Great Britain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm feeling really sad about the pensioners, who try to play by the rules, and now they have no pension. So.
Well, we all tried to play by the rules here. The federal government is not. They are flagrantly in violation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And they justify it by saying basically they're in a state of war, and war makes everything quasi-legal.
But the government can just disappear $21 trillion, and we can't. We have no recourse.
No, well, you can't sue them, that's for sure. It's a huge embarrassment for the government. It's a huge embarrassment for the Pentagon because about somewhere between $3 and $4 trillion of that missing money vanished into the Pentagon that we know of. On September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld got up there and just admitted the Pentagon had lost this $3 trillion, and it should have been the military financial scandal of the year. But of course, 24 hours later, 9/11 happened, and Rumsfeld got to basically walk away from that revelation unscathed.
And perchance, the next day, when the attack or bomb or missile or airplane or whatever hit the Pentagon, they just by chance hit that office where this investigation was going on.
You're absolutely right. And the plane literally flew around the building to come in on the correct side.
Yeah. So, how about them apples?
Yep. Okay?
Thank you, Michael.
All right. Thank you for the phone call. Ciao. We're going to switch over to Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh yeah, you were talking about all these taxes, and how the municipalities are going to have to, raise taxes. Well, in Chicago, we know what that's about, because when they raised the sweet tax on all beverages by a penny an ounce, but people just took off. I mean, they were buying out of Indiana. They were going to different counties. They fled. And what happened, they were putting a lot of retail businesses out of sale, because a lot of retail businesses, it could be 30 to 40% is their pop sales,
Yes.
Not just pop, other beverages too. So what happened, everybody took off, businesses started to go down, and they repealed it. Now, I never heard of a tax being repealed. Once they put a tax on you, normally, it never comes, just like the tollways, okay? The tollways were supposed to pay for themselves, okay? That's another racket. The tollways, the tolls go up. The tolls never went away. The tolls are never going to go away. Just like I don't mean to be, getting negative here, but, look at the lottery. The lottery was supposed to pay for the schools. The school systems are broke. And you were talking about pensions. All those pensions are broke. The state of Illinois is broke. But, the lottery is supposed to take care of that. BS, But I just wanted to mention that that sweet tax that got repealed, because that's what's going to happen. The bottom line is this, okay? Everybody's going to leave. Everybody's leaving Illinois. Everybody's going to leave. Everybody's going to quit buying, and that's the way it's going to go. And until it all implodes on itself, until we get to that point that you're talking about. So anyway, I just wanted to share that tax repeal with you, and know this. Bottom line is everybody's going to just leave. That's what's going to happen. That's what's happening right now.
Yes.
People can't. They're not going to pay. They're not going to be able to. Go ahead, raise property taxes. Raise. Put up your red light cameras. That's another extortion racket. Keep doing it. Keep taking. Eventually, it's going to implode. It's going to fall by its own weight, and that's exactly what you were talking about. But in the meantime, you're going to see everybody just take off. Everybody's going to flee. So I got to get going, but thank you for taking my call. Okay?
You're welcome. Thank you very much for the phone call. Yeah, the issue is the nation is running out of money. It's all being sucked out at the top. We're being bled dry, bankrupted to pay for the war. The money junkies' unbridled greed is another issue. And the fact is that the various state governments are having to spend huge amounts of tax money on servicing their debt, because back when the U.S. national debt was only about $6 trillion, they started playing this little trick where they would take tax money from the states and they would send less and less of it back, shifting the U.S. government's debt onto those states, forcing those states to borrow money. And now everybody's borrowed to the hilt, and the interest payments are basically where a lot of the tax money goes to. We had a story that we covered yesterday by, I think it was 2025. They're saying more than half of the taxes you pay will go to pay the interest on the national debt. And yeah, at some point it's going to implode. And it's going to implode because private central banking, by design, produces more debt than money with which to pay that debt, to make us all debt slaves. But at some point, that debt becomes unsustainable. And that's when it's all going to start coming apart. Now, Donald Trump has taken Britain's National Health Service to task. He's calling them freeloaders, and saying that after Brexit, that Britain should be willing to pay more for American drugs than they have been now. And he's basically saying that he's going to do this to help and lower the price of prescription drugs for U.S. patients by forcing the National Health Service to pay more. This is a move that would cost Great Britain billions of dollars. I think it would be a lot more productive to look at why drug prices have gone through the roof. It's another scam. It's another racket. Remember that guy who bought that rights to the medication and then jacked up the price something like 17 times? It's all about greed. The medical industrial complex is about money, 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 money. And everything associated with it gets dragged more expensive as well, costlier. Over at the Supreme Court, the gun rights activists have had a major disappointment. The Supreme Court refused to hear a civil rights lawsuit brought about by the Cal Guns Foundation and the Second Amendment Foundation. And the lawsuit was brought to challenge Alameda County, California, challenged the zoning laws that effectively ban gun stores, saying it violates county residents' Second Amendment rights. They can't take your guns away. What they do is they changed the zoning laws to make it impossible for anybody to have a gun store in the county. And yeah, it violates our Second Amendment rights to be able to protect ourselves. I'm sure that people in Alameda County are just going to go to the other counties and buy their ammunition and guns there. But again, it's just trying to find another way to disarm the American people so that we will do what we're told to do. Now, near Chicago, there was a high school in Dixon, Illinois, and apparently there was a school shooting that was stopped cold by an armed guard. And the shooter basically shot at the police officer who was working at the school, and the officer returned fire. The suspect was injured and taken into custody. So, see, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. We keep seeing that over and over and over again. Now, Trump was making a speech at this commemoration of police officers the other day, and he came on out and said criminals who kill police officers should get the death penalty. And basically saying the attack on our police must stop. Now, as we reported yesterday, the actual numbers have come on out. There is no war on the police. There are no more police being killed now in the line of duty than there were a year ago. It was completely made on up. What I want Trump to start addressing is law-abiding citizens killing police officers trying to kill the innocent law-abiding citizens, because that's a major issue. Sometimes the cops go rogue. They kick down the wrong door. And they are demonstrably trigger-happy. And so we have a natural right to self-defense. Over at Evergreen State College, this got a lot of people upset. They have this no whites allowed day of absence. And it made national headlines last year after it hosted an event that asked all white people not to come on campus for a day of absence. And they're doing it again. They're going to have to do it off the campus. But apparently, they want now a 3-day day of absence. And some gatherings are advertising is open to all skin colors, and others ask only that people of color attend. So there's a push back on that one. Now, a little bit of good news for all you computer users, because the Senate earlier this week passed a bill to bring back Obama-era net neutrality. So net neutrality is back in play again. I don't know when the House is going to vote on this or whether Trump might veto it to please his friends in the telecom business. But at least the Senate is listening to the people. And they should be. It's an election year. They're vulnerable. There's only so much election fraud going on. There's a lot of it, but not enough to guarantee a lock on every single seat. And Fox News just had a story here about how the Democratic poll numbers are continuing to slide. And contrary to Maxine Waters' optimism, it looks like the Democrats may not pick up the House of Representatives in November. They're certainly not poised to pick up the Senate. And that's why Maxine is out there playing the reparations card. They're desperate to get people out there. Story coming on out of Blacklisted News. Conservatives in an uproar after Twitter deploys draconian shadow ban filter. And Twitter is basically claiming they're using thousands of behavioral signals when filtering search replies and algorithmic recommendations. And if they believe you're trying to game the system or acting like a jerk, it will push your tweets lower down. The problem is that people studying how the system works are seeing a built-in bias. Conservatives are being targeted while liberals are not. Let's see. There was a story that just came on through. We'll worry about that later. Media giant News Corp is now targeting censorship by Facebook, Google, and Amazon in push for an algorithm review board. Now, that's a good idea if these social media corporations are going to be filtering what's going on. We all have a right to know how the filters operate and to make sure that those filters are, in fact, unbiased and fair and objective. So we'll see what happens there as well. Remember the Vault 7 leak of CIA tools was sent to WikiLeaks and then put out on the dark web? They've identified the suspect, the leaker, Joshua Schultz, and he once worked for the US CIA, and they're saying he's responsible for last year's massive leak of top secret CIA hacking tools. The guy lives in New York. He's 29 years old. He's in federal jail. Not for the hack, but apparently for child pornography charges. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the world of computers. And over at Google, there has been a bit of a stink because Google's management, Project Maviri, is supplying machine learning tools to the Pentagon to support drone strikes. The project has been hugely divisive within Google, with employees pointing out that the company is wildly profitable and doesn't need to compromise on its ethics. Google has ethics? That's a new one for me. basically, they're pointing out the drone program is a system of extrajudicial killing far from the battlefield, and Google's long-term health depends on its ability to win back and retain the trust of users around the world following the recent embarrassments. A dozen Googlers have already quit over this, just walked on out of Google, and 4,000 of the employees have signed an open letter to the company's CEO asking him to cancel the contract. They don't want to be seen as a de facto part of the U.S. military. That is going to be bad for their public image. Now, Concordia Publishing House is the publishing arm of the 2 million member Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. This is a conservative denomination that rejects ordaining women, abortion, and homosexual marriage. Founded in 1869, CPH is the oldest publishing company west of the Mississippi River and the world's largest distinctly Lutheran publishing house. According to its website, it publishes the world's most widely circulated daily devotional resource, printing and distributing over 850,000 copies quarterly, children's books, so forth and so on. And apparently, they ran afoul of Google. And Google basically started blocking their ads and saying that ads based on religious beliefs are not allowed on Google. So if CPH removed all the references to Jesus in the Bible, their ads would be reinstated. That's going to be a tough call to make. Now, as you already know, I myself am not religious, but on the other hand, I think Google has stepped over a line here. Now, I don't spend a lot of time on Google anymore, but I have to wonder if Jewish ads promoting the Jewish religion, were put on Google. Would they be struck down as well? I would really like to know that. Homeland Security has unveiled a new cybersecurity strategy amid the ongoing threats. And basically, they want to address the growing number of cybersecurity risks as it works to assess them and reduce vulnerabilities. The cyber threat landscape is shifting in real time, and we've reached a historic turning point. This is from DHS Chief Kirsten Nielsen. And it's clear our cyber adversaries can now threaten the very fabric of our republic itself. Now then, more about this when we come back from station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So we're talking about how Homeland Security has a new cyber strategy. Reading between the lines, it looks to me like we should not expect this new strategy to be going after the ransomware writers, the virus and Trojan writers. It looks to me like what they're really talking about is trying to control the narrative online. And further down in the article, they're talking about how the announcement from Homeland Security comes amid concerns about the security of the 2018 U.S. midterm congressional elections and numerous high-profile hacking of U.S. companies. So us ordinary citizens, we're still kind of on our own. And they're still pushing that idea that Russian propaganda helped Donald Trump into the White House. Actually, what put Donald Trump in the White House was Hillary Clinton's long record of corruption. And what the corrupt politicians in the federal government want is for the independent media and the internet to not be able to talk about crime and corruption by politicians, so that they can go on out and make all kinds of empty promises and continue to win their elections. That's what they want. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has eliminated the White House's top cyber policy role, jettisoning a key position created during the Obama presidency to harmonize the government's overall approach to cybersecurity policy and digital warfare, which is what this is really all about, digital warfare. Politico reported last week that John Bolton was maneuvering to cut the cyber coordinator role, in a move that many experts criticized as a major step backwards for federal cybersecurity policy. Now, here's an interesting little story. This came out of Russia Today. And there was this lawyer who was doing an interview on Russia Today, concerned about how fake news is now starting to become fake evidence in court. And he's talking about how anybody can create a video. The animation software is affordable. The special effects are incredible. And it's getting harder and harder to detect fraud in a video or image presentation. And the concern is that if a video goes viral, corporate media picks it up and presents it as news, and that cements it as being authentic in the minds of the public. And then a lawyer can take that video into court as part of a case against somebody, and it could be a case of a frame-up because the original media is fake here. Well, I have a solution to that, and that would be have such media, images, videos, audio recordings, adhere to the same chain of custody rules that currently apply to physical evidence. You get the original. You don't get it at the end of a hand-me-down, 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 where everybody's had a chance to play with it. But you get that original media. You have the name and identity of the person who first created it. And from then on, it is signed off on its way between the investigators and the court. But there is a problem with how sophisticated the technology to manipulate imagery and video has become. And it's sort of the dark side of the computer animation revolution in the motion picture industry. And I can tell you all the way back when we were first starting up and creating the basic tools to do this, nobody there even thought that it might be used to commit fraud. We were an entertainment company. We're here to make dinosaurs tap dance. Now, as we mentioned, I think last week, end of the week, or maybe it was earlier this week, the Democratic Republic of Congo Ministry of Health has declared an Ebola outbreak. This is the 9th outbreak in the past 4 decades. The World Health Organization is not yet recommending travel restrictions. But then we got an update on the story from the Daily Mail, where apparently some of these Ebola patients have actually gotten to a large city. And that could result in an explosive contagion. And the United Nations is now considering whether to declare a health emergency of international concern. So the deadly virus was first detected in the northwest city of Mbandaka, with a population of about 1 million people. And so far, there are 23 deaths believed to have been caused by the Ebola outbreak. But those numbers are probably out of date. Taiwan has already taken the step of issuing a travel notice for the Democratic Republic of Congo to level 2, which means you can still get there, but you have to have a really good reason for wanting to go. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We've been talking about the genetically modified organism issue for a very, very long time. And I view genetics as the most dangerous technology man has ever played with. We're tinkering with the code of life itself. And mistakes could be catastrophic. But of course, American corporations have grabbed onto the technology and they've used it to create new forms of life which can be patented and sold for more money, or in the case of farm seeds, royalties and residuals. And a lot of people are starting to become very concerned about GMO food. And the issue of GMO labeling has been back and forth many times. They did try and pass a law in California to mandate GMO labeling, but Monsanto went on out there and just did a massive lobbying campaign. It went to all the TV stations and all the newspapers and said, we run a lot of ads in your media. We will stop that immediately unless you come out against GMO labeling. So the media caved. They went where the money was going to be. They need that advertising revenue. Then, of course, Vermont succeeded in passing a GMO labeling law. And then the federal government stepped on in and said, okay, well, we have to set a national policy on this. And they've had this long, ongoing debate about it. And last week, the Department of Agriculture published their draft rule implementing this disclosure law for foods with genetically engineered ingredients. That's the good news. The bad news is there isn't actually anything on the label itself that says anything about GMO. So it's leaving consumers in the dark. Where you have to go to find out if there's GMO in the food is in the QR code, that little sort of bionic fingerprint that is on the side of the package. That is, and apparently the status of the food is located in there. So people who don't have a smartphone and an app to read the QR code, people who are shopping in areas without high-speed broadband or Wi-Fi are going to be left in the dark. They have no way of knowing. I think if you're going to have a GMO labeling law, just have a label on there saying GMO in this product or no GMO in the product. But Monsanto wants to ban both. They don't want you to know, which tells you that Monsanto knows there is a problem with GMO, because if GMO were really that good, Monsanto would be out there, demanding labels saying contains more GMO than the other product over there. Twice as much GMO. Get your GMO dose today here. And then Monsanto comes on out with these ideas that opposition to GMOs it's unscientific. It's a panic reaction. It's from people who really don't know what's going on. It borders on the immoral. It's restraint of our trade. But there are some very smart people out there who are sounding the alarm about GMOs. And to me, the single greatest cause for alarm is how many GMO products have been put on out there that have displayed undesired, unwanted, unpredictable secondary effects. And the example I always like to use is the Roundup Ready corn. And yes, the corn plants will not respond to the glyphosate in Roundup. But those plants also, the stalks are much tougher than the normal natural variety, to the point where corn farmers actually have to buy Kevlar belted tires for their tractors. Now, nobody at Monsanto knew this was going to happen. They weren't even looking for it. And who knows what other secondary effects are in there that nobody has yet discovered. That's the real danger. This technology has been rushed to the marketplace before it's fully understood. So apparently there was this Purdue University president, Mitch Daniels, who came out with an article. Avoiding GMOs isn't just anti-science, it's immoral. And he basically was out there just pleading that we embrace GMOs in agriculture. And his arguments were basically the health and ecological safety of GMOs is unquestionable, settled silence. Remember the last time you heard that? It was by those people back in the 1990s who said snowfalls are a thing of the past. There is no such thing as settled science. When new facts come along, the science will change. This is another classic case of using scientists as the updated version of priests to tell you what to believe. He makes the argument it's immoral to deny developing countries the agricultural technology they need to boost food production and feed their growing populations. Sorry about that. I'm under the weather today a bit. There's a problem with that. The GMO versions of these plants are turning out to have lower yields than the natural varieties. Remember the BT cotton disaster over in India? It turned out the BT cotton was much less resistant to variations in temperature and hydrology than the natural variety. Something that the developers probably didn't test for. They were growing their test cotton in a controlled greenhouse. once it got out into the field, was a disaster. I mean, thousands of Indian farmers lost their farms due to the failed cotton crop. Many of them committed suicide. The reality is the ecological and health safety of GMOs is very controversial. And the problem is, in this day of bought and paid for science and irreproducible results in the journals, it's hard to know which science and which scientists to trust. And here in the United States, most university agronomy departments receive massive funding from the agri-tech companies, who, according to Scientific American, have given themselves veto power over the work of independent researchers. In other words, anybody at these universities who wants to look for adverse effects in GMOs is going to have their funding cut. It's a totally, totally corrupted system. And I don't know about you, but as soon as they're available, I'm going to be getting one of those apps for my smartphone so that we can scan the packaging, read that little QR code, and find out what has GMO and what doesn't. Because it's not a fully tested product. And these products get put out there before they're really fully understood. Remember the thalidomide disaster? It's a classic example. Monsanto likes to say that glyphosate is perfectly safe because it only interferes with chemicals that are found in plants. Now, ignoring the fact that glyphosate has been listed as a probable human carcinogen by the World Health Organization, it is turning out that glyphosate actually disrupts the microbiome in your gut. And according to this report from Daniel Mandrioli at the Ramazzini Institute in Bologna, Italy, it said they found significant and potential detrimental effects from glyphosate to the gut bacteria. So we have to be very, very careful. Science has become commercialized and politicized. Again, look at the human-caused global warming hoax, which is what it was. Now, here's another story about why you should be careful who you trust here. This is actually reported on CNN. And it's a story about a guy named Dr. Jorge Zamora Quezada and how he basically got caught misdiagnosing patients and selling them medications to fund what is described as an opulent lifestyle. And the specific case they had was this lady named Maria Zapata, who went to this doctor more than 5 years ago because one of her knees was bothering her. And Dr. Quezada told her she had arthritis and that they had to give her injections to strengthen the cartilage. And eventually her husband asked, "Why are you giving her so many injections?" And the doctor said the treatment would help, and it didn't. And other doctors raised concern about these so-called treatments. And then her family doctor told her she didn't actually have arthritis. We have lost our way as a country. We have allowed the love of money to corrupt us. And we have left behind other things like pride in doing a good job, a commitment to ethics and morality. We have to rebalance our society. The end-all and be-all of all of our activities should not be another piece of paper with colored ink all over it. But we do seem to be there now. Over in Sweden, they've had a study where they're seeing increased rates of cervical cancer, and it's been linked to an increase in the HPV vaccinations. This was published in the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, and they studied cervical cancer rates among women in Sweden and basically saw a link because women who were too old to be given the vaccine when the program started weren't given the vaccine. Their cancer incidence remained where it should be. but among the people who were given the HPV vaccine, it went up. Now, the study obviously casts doubt on the efficacy of the HPV vaccine, and in fact seems to suggest the vaccine is linked to increased cancer rates. Another story coming on out of stillnessinthestorm.com. New information has called the effectiveness of the current flu vaccine into question. A total of 8 residents of Santa Barbara County have died this year from contracting the flu. And in assessing the health records of the 8 fatalities, it has been revealed that 7 of the 8 had received the current influenza vaccine. Now, there has been an issue with vaccines all along, and it's sold to us scare tactics. And every time there's an accident, like when the Spanish flu vaccine, the swine flu vaccine, actually was killing more people than the swine flu itself did. And the media basically glosses it over because they want those advertising dollars. There is a problem with the fact that the vaccine industry as a whole has been indemnified from civil lawsuits from making bad products. There was actually a provision in the Homeland Security Act that said we cannot sue the vaccine manufacturers. The rationale being that in the event of a bioemergency or biological attack, the vaccine makers would have to fast track their product and we shouldn't be angry with them if they made a mistake. Well, if you really want that, then have it written into the law. In the event of a biological emergency or bioweapon assault, the indemnity kicks in. But that's not what they did. They just assigned it blanket across the board. And then they set up the Vaccine Injury Court to basically preserve the profitability of big pharma. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the Vaccine Injury Court and the indemnification of the vaccine companies in the Homeland Security Act. Because what the vaccine companies wanted to avoid are civil lawsuits which would include punitive damages. And instead, everybody has to go to the vaccine court and make their case there, and the court will then issue basically money to cover expenses, but they do not allow punitive damages. So that's a big money saver right there. And the vaccine court tends to side with the vaccine makers. That's its purpose. Remember some years ago, the CDC, which by the way owns the patents on several vaccines itself, came on out with a report saying it had been absolutely proven that there's no link between vaccines and autism, and the vaccine court would use that document to deny payment to people whose children had been made autistic by vaccines. Then one of the lead writers of that report went public saying it was a complete fraud, that they cherry-picked the data to basically make up a document to protect the vaccine companies. Now, despite all the foot dragging and the obfuscation and the fraud and the deception, the vaccine court has paid $3.7 billion in damages to families. And the other thing that you need to look at is the prevalence of autism. Before this mass vaccination stuff really took off, autism was rare. It was 1 out of hundreds of kids. And today it's like 1 out of every 64. So you know something's going on there. But this country is all about the money. That's what the government wants. That's what the corporations want. They are, in fact, behaving like true psychopaths in the classic definition. Absolutely no empathy. And I think nothing illustrates that better than this attempt to explain away young babies who die right after getting their vaccines by saying the parents killed them. Shaken baby syndrome. So you have these parents who've just gone through the trauma of losing their child, and they get traumatized again by being accused of murdering their kid. And some people have gone to prison, still insisting they're absolutely innocent. All this to protect the profits of big pharmaceutical corporations. It is a sick system. we've lost our sense of balance. Yes, it's nice to make money. We'd all like to make money. I don't need to make a lot of it, just like to be comfortable. But balancing that has to be pride in one's work, a sense of altruism, of caring for the community and the people in it. Because without that balance, societies self-destruct, which is what's going on here now. Over at the Daily Mail, they have an interesting story. A company named Livestock Labs has created a sensor that can be implanted under a cow's skin to monitor its health and movements. And the idea is that farmers will have a way to easily monitor illness in livestock and quickly stop the spread of disease. They're basically Borg cows. And I wonder how long it's going to be before they start talking about making these chips for human beings. In fact, the company's already said they're hoping to create similar implantable chips for human beings. So your health can be monitored and your location known. Let's go on back to the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. And it's back in the news again because the city has basically stopped providing bottles of drinking water to the residents. And the tap water is no better than it was before. And they're trying to take steps to stop the poisoning of Flint's drinking water, but it's going to take basically replacing the whole system. And they don't even have that money. But the real issue is that you need to look beyond Flint and realize that a lot of cities have the same problem. I don't mean to pick on Chicago, but they did it themselves. Liberal stronghold, strong gun laws. There's lead in the water in Chicago. Now, lead is a neurotoxin, and it does bioaccumulate in the body. Now, when the Flint crisis first started up, Aaron Brockovich supposedly was launching a campaign to deal with this, and they had been testing water from all across the country. And they found out that most of the samples were contaminated with lead and other heavy metals and other toxins that are basically not being filtered out by the sewage treatment plants. Now, we're very lucky here in Hawaii. We have very good quality water. I went out to eBay. I got myself a little water testing kit that tested for biological contamination, lead, a bunch of other stuff, including the hardness of the water. Obviously, our water is very hard here in Hawaii. It's being sucked out from inside an extinct volcano. But if you're concerned about your water, you might want to get one of those testing kits. And if it comes back with bad news, you may need to look at a water delivery service for your family. And I know it's an added expense during the month, but contrast that against the long-term effects on your health. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I want to step on back to glyphosate because members just posted a couple of interesting stories on that subject at whatreallyhappened.com. And apparently glyphosate is a little more harmful than we've been led to believe. And apparently it preferentially kills off beneficial gut microbes, but it allows potential pathogens like Clostridia to run wild. And glyphosate also chelates essential minerals such as manganese, iron, cobalt, molybdenum, and copper so that these gut microbes do not have access to them. This leads to chronic inflammatory states in the gut as well as increased intestinal permeability, a mechanism at the core of many chronic illnesses, including inflammatory bowel disease, depression, and autoimmunity. And that was ahead of another article, how Crohn's disease marked by dramatic changes in gut bacteria. The largest clinical study of its kind is revealing new insights into the causes of Crohn's disease, a periodic inflammation of the intestines. The research, which involved 668 children, shows that numbers of some beneficial bacteria in the gut decrease in Crohn's patients, while the number of potentially harmful bacteria increases. Well, to me, this says there's a link between glyphosate And what they're doing is they're taking the symptoms of glyphosate toxicity and they're giving them names and saying it's a disease. And then, as you watch on TV, they sell you more medicine for it. You have to wonder how many of the chronic ailments the American people are suffering are due to chemicals in the food and in the environment. And remember, glyphosate does not just stay on the farm fields. They actually spray produce at the supermarket with it as a preservative. So to me, there's a very clear link. Crohn's disease is a symptom of glyphosate exposure. And I cannot wait for that little scanner. Somebody just sent me an email saying that the PLU code on produce, there are 5 numbers, and the first is 8. If the first is 8, the produce fruit is genetically modified. The Environmental Working Group is a great resource in this area. Okay, so that's another way that you can deal with that. But we have to be very, very careful. We're living in a country in which government allows corporations to sell us toxic products, all for the sake of increased profitability. The love of money is destroying our nation. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. Apparently, over in Europe, they had a blizzard. Several feet of snow fell. Now, the media is already out there trying to sell the idea that the world is warming again. Somebody actually had a story about, this is our 400th month of warming, above the average. The last time we had a month that was below the average, Reagan was in office. Well, again, the data's being cooked. They're trying to get you to forget about all the snow and ice we just went through. They're trying to counter the announcement that we just had the most severe 2-year cooling period in the last century. Oh, it's warmer. It really is warmer. It's all your fault. You've got to get ready to pay a carbon tax. Apparently, up in the North Atlantic, they're looking at a record iceberg season. And they've got a lot of ice arches around Greenland. Apparently, they've got so many icebergs up there. Cape Town, where they have a water crisis, is now thinking about towing icebergs to alleviate their water shortage. And yeah, that would be a really good idea, because the icebergs fall off the land. They are not made of salt water. You might have to shave off a few layers of the ice, but there's going to be pure water, very pure water, inside those icebergs. It is a good resource, and Cape Town really needs the help. Okay, first of all, I have a quick announcement here. Chris Hinckley is going to be filling in for John Stadmiller today, so you may want to stay tuned for his show there. And we're going to take a phone call from Chris in Las Vegas. Chris, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you, Michael. You were just elucidating a large array of complications related to glycophosphate, which would reasonably, I think, propel most of us of any sanity to conclude that that is a weaponized chemical explicitly.
Well, it is a toxic. It is a weed killer, so, it has a toxic component. But Monsanto is trying to sell the idea that it's absolutely harmless for human beings, and the science is not bearing that out. Apparently, Monsanto can't bribe all the scientists in the world, and people are starting to look at this. And now we're finding out that exposure to glyphosate may be responsible for some of these new and improved diseases that we're seeing on TV these days, like Crohn's disease. I never even heard of Crohn's disease before 3 years ago.
I can't argue with you there. I do remember very clearly, I don't remember the exact nomenclature of it, but antifreeze is a very similar titled chemical using the glycophos in part of its ingredients. And of course, we know it's deadly to animals and man and other people that might possibly ingest it by licking or drinking it, and has been used in a few murders. And so if we contend that this chemical is so dangerous, then why would anybody of any sanity spray it on things to preserve it in the food counters at your local grocer, or on crops in the field, because the animals eat the crops, the birds eat the crops, and it pretty much filters down through everything that eats anything and drinks anything to poison us all from that insidious chemical that's being sprayed on the world to destroy it. Sounds like a Satan's or Monsanto special.
Well, again, it's all about the money here. And as a matter of fact, Claire and I were having a discussion. We have, for some reason, got a lot of people at Claire's church who are dealing with cancer. We've had 2 deaths in the last 2 months, both of whom were members of the choir. And one of them, the cancer just appeared. It was just weeks. She went from being, perfectly fine, apparently. Then all of a sudden, they thought she had a blood clot in the lung. It metastasized into her brain, and we had to go to her memorial service a few days ago, and we've got another one coming up this weekend as well. And Claire was wondering how many of these people who are dealing with cancer are using that Roundup on their yards, because the TV is telling them you'll have a beautiful yard here and your friends and neighbors will admire you because your front lawn looks like a golf course. And it's all about the selling. And again, corporate media will not report on any of this stuff to their audience. And the fact that science can be bought and paid for is very alarming. Nobody is looking out for the American people. And that's what all of these taxpayer-funded agencies like FDA and USDA are supposed to be doing. But they aren't. They are as turned in favor of the corporations as the SEC or the Minerals Management Service. And that's why I keep saying we're no longer a capitalist republic. We have descended into an outright fascist economic dictatorship, which is defined as when corporate interests and the government are aligned together against the general population. And that's exactly where we are right now.
Well, my last little closing comment, actually 2 aspects of the same comment, is your observations are very critically accurate. It's my contention, and has been for some time, that most of the agencies of government, since they're all private profits corporations, have in fact been weaponized against we the people and are used to basically soft kill off many of us. And further, the injections for infection with all these chemicals, adjuvants, stimulants, and other things that are being incorporated in them, metallics, are also very insidiously dangerous themselves. With that, I thank you so much for letting me contribute. Have a great day, and God bless America, and I appreciate the show that you have on today, Michael.
All right, well, thank you very much here. We're going to let you go. And I don't think it's a deliberate program of culling the herd. I think it's just greed run amok. If we sell this, we'll make money. We'll get people to buy it with a lot of advertising. People will buy it. We'll get their money. And if it causes them harm, we'll just get more money by selling them a cure for what ails them. And we won't admit it's a symptom of this product over here. We'll just give it a new fancy name and declare it a new disease and come up with a new medicine about for that. To me, looking at these 2 articles about how glyphosate wrecks the gut microbiome, and this article about this is exactly what's being seen in the patients of Crohn's disease, I think what is being called Crohn's disease is a reaction to exposure to glyphosate. And it is everywhere. They even spray it on women's hygiene products for some strange reason. But it is. We literally should not trust any of these products. And that, of course, mandates going back to a much simpler lifestyle, dealing with your local farmers market, and stay away from these products that have been put to the marketplace way too soon. We look at things like monosodium glutamate makes you eat more, so the food manufacturers get more money. It's all about grinding out the money, and it's not a deliberate plan to harm the American people. It is simply they're oblivious. They're greedy, they want more money, and they have absolutely no empathy for the American people, which is why I'm starting to subscribe to the theory that our top-level CEOs and our government truly are psychopaths. They make snap decisions like going to market too soon. They don't think about long-term consequences. and they have zero empathy for anybody around them. All right, so let's talk about human-caused global warming. We already started with the story about the snow and in Europe and the glaciers, rather icebergs, up in the North Atlantic here. But here's an article that basically reinforces something I've been saying all along. This came out of the Express, and it's reporting on a climate study published this week. And they say it's going to radically change the way we understand the causes of changes in global climates and how we could be caught in a 405,000-year-long cycle of shifting climate. And the team of scientists went out to Arizona, and they're studying these ancient rocks, and they believe Earth's orbit plays a vital role in cyclical climate changes. Now remember, you heard it here first. So basically these scientists are thinking that the gravitational forces of Venus and Jupiter are what shift Earth's round orbit to a more elliptical one and then back on a regular cycle. That would make a lot of sense to me. And when the orbit is more elliptical, the Earth spends longer at the far end, according to Kepler's laws of orbital motion, and we get the ice ages. When the orbit becomes more circular, Earth stays closer to the sun, we get the interglacial periods, which is what we have been in. And this idea that the sun and nature have no impact on climate, but your plastic bags do. That's a big selling point of the carbon Nazis. Okay, let's take another phone call. Mark in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. I'd like to acknowledge this whole deal about corporations. I would suggest a good read. It's a book called The Corporation, The Pathological Pursuit to Profit and Power. And there's also a movie called The Corporation. It's about 2.5 hours long, and you can watch it on YouTube. I encourage everybody to watch it, and if you've seen it once, watch it again. Big reveal about the nature of corporations and how pathologically sick they are, really. So on the subject, a couple of days ago, somebody called in and said, I can't believe how many people are dependent upon the government. Well, I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of people dependent upon these corporations. By the way, you mentioned the other day that PayPal is the only way to, really kind of like do transactions. And I beg to differ. Yeah, for convenience sake. Now, or if we're going to sell ourselves out for convenience by doing business with the enemy, which is PayPal, I believe is one of them, then go ahead. But, there are other methods to send money, and they're better than PayPal, I think, and that would be like the post office. Sending to somebody, and on the other end, they can cash it at the post office.
The context of that discussion was I was explaining why I had taken down my cryptocurrency donation site because Hawaii passed a law against cryptocurrencies, or at least having a wallet inside the state. And so I just took that whole thing down. But yeah, people who don't want to go through PayPal, they can use the Postal Service. They can send a check or a money order, or some people do send cash with no return address on the envelope, and thank you to all those anonymous donors. But I wasn't saying, PayPal was the only way to do it. It is certainly the most commonly used system, but there are others out there like Zoom, especially if you're dealing business with Europe. And I imagine there may be some other systems coming online as well.
Right. So, and one other point here, you said that you didn't believe that that this idea of it's just for.
Hello.
On that one, it's called Codex Alimentarius. It was a plan put forth a while back, and it has to do with one of the tenets of that Codex Alimentarius is taking over chemical companies. And I think Monsanto, oh yeah, that's right. Let's see, Dioxin, Agent Orange, those are really good for us, right? So,
oh yeah.
I think there was, and I'm originally from Missouri. And by the way, there was a town in Missouri that actually shut down because it was contaminated with dioxin. You remember that? Like wasn't that the 70s?
Yeah,
that they had
there's also a town in Italy that had to shut down and be fenced off. Agent Orange was actually developed here at the University of Hawaii, and they did the testing down on the military reservation on the Big Island, and that's still fenced off. You can't go in there. It's still lethal to go in there. Anyway, Mark, I'm going to have to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break here. We're going to close the phone lines. When we come on back, more news about Monsanto and an update on our volcano. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And again, a reminder, Chris Hinckley will be filling in for John Stadmiller today. So stay tuned after my show ends in about 5 minutes and take a listen to what he has to say. Okay, now this weekend is the 7th International March Against Monsanto. This is a global event, so you're probably going to have to do a web search to find out what is happening near where you live. But this is taking place in hundreds of cities on 6 continents. The big issue this year is the upcoming merger between Monsanto and Bayer. And you probably remember Bayer is the company that used HIV-tainted blood to make a hemophilia medication. When that came on out, rather than throw that medicine away, Bayer simply shipped it to other countries that didn't have laws to protect against such things, sold it, made money, and gave a lot of people HIV. But that's okay, we can sell them HIV medicine now. That's how it's all supposed to work. So let's do an update on our volcano. The low-level eruption of lava is continuing from all the fissures down there along the eastern rift zone. And there's a lot of steam, a lot of spattering going on. The Hawaii Volcano Observatory, they have field crews out there trying to keep a track on where the lava is going and send the information to the Hawaii County Civil Defense. There is a concern that helicopters will be needed to evacuate people who refuse to evacuate when first asked. Mostly people are being told to shelter in place under this enormous ash cloud that has shot up 5 miles into the air. And because there's very little wind down there on the Big Island, the ash is coming right back down onto people's homes. And if you're on the Big Island and if you are listening to this broadcast, remember that ash is very heavy. And if a lot of it builds up on your roof, it can collapse the roof. So you need to put on your little painter's mask so that you're not inhaling the stuff, which is also bad. Get up there on the roof with a broom and just keep it swept clean. Okay? Now, the volcanologists are saying, yes, this is a big eruption. They're saying it's not the big one. They're expecting an even larger event to happen. So this is quite spectacular, and it's also quite deadly. And I remember when Claire and I were down on the Big Island. I took my nephew down there several years ago when he was much smaller, dangled him over the crater. And we went through Kaonohi, and we just saw how the lava had gone through homes, surrounded cars. It was rather amazing to see. Just the full force of Mother Nature on display there. And I'm sure the people who have been affected by this eruption are probably not as enthusiastic about Mother Nature right now. I'm still noticing where people down on the Big Island are giving offerings to Madame Pele, which is silly. They're literally running up to the edge of the congealed lava and throwing flowers and stuff on there. That's a little dangerous. There could still be an internal fracture and outgassing. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for Chris Hinckley. I'm sure he's going to share a lot of interesting stuff with you. Take what you learn here and at the website, whatreallyhappened.com. Share it with everybody that you know. We have to keep getting the word out. Looking at CNN's loss of audience over the last year, it is clear we are winning the war for the minds of America, but we need your help. Get on out there. Tell people about Republic Broadcasting. Tell them about whatreallyhappened.com. Please continue to donate. We need the money, and we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.